Hello and welcome to my series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today has substantively, significantly and dramatically impacted the contours of serious cinema. He's one of the great cinematic icons of India, in fact, of the cinema of the world. He's recently been awarded the Dadasaheb Phalke Award, which provides the immediate context for this conversation. I'm delighted to welcome Adoor Gopalakrishnan. Congratulations on the winning of this great award. What has Dadasaheb Phalke and the award meant to you at this time? You have been a filmmaker of rare passion and integrity, and your work has been a dramatic articulation of your own worldview. It communicates in so many powerful ways. Does an award really matter to a man of your commitment and drive?
Well, I think in some way this is a recognition of the so-called offbeat cinema. Cinema which is not considered to be in the mainstream. A cinema which is slowly being marginalized by the media, and of course slowly by the public also, because there is such propaganda and advertisement and propagation of a different kind of cinema.
But in a way, your cinema is so much more, is closer to the people. It's much closer to reality, and one would imagine that its people empathize with it, because in a sense you're portraying the real world, and what is being otherwise portrayed is something artificial.
I do not mean that the people have rejected this cinema, but then I'm talking about my kind of work, which has practitioners all over the country, particularly after independence, along with the resurgence of literary works. There is a new kind of enthusiasm and force instilled into the works in the languages other than Hindi. Hindi is of course there. There have been great works of literary, long tradition of literature in Hindi, but then there was, side by side, you had also very old literatures with a long past, and now in the present they were rediscovering things and then responding to the contemporary reality around them. So in the post-independence period, along with the literature and other many developments that happened, cinema was also finding its roots in the different regions of the country. Unfortunately, it was immediately dubbed the regional cinema. I think it was a big mistake. They are not regional cinema. They are cinemas of India, made in Malayalam, in Bengali, in Kannada, in Gujarati, in Assamese, so many of the cinemas. We have not just one cinema, and of course, importantly, in Marathi and in Hindi, there were also very important films being made. But the problem was that these films were immediately dubbed as regional, and there, the commercial cinema of Bombay became the cinema for the country. That was a big mistake. And in fact, even in terms of the number of films being made, Hindi commercial cinema constituted not even 1/4 of the total production.
When this award was announced, you were quoted in the press as saying, well, now I hope people will watch my films. Well,
not particularly my films, the other cinema, that's what I said.
But you have been so hugely, widely, critically acclaimed. Isn't that enough in some ways? What gratifications are you seeking as an artist?
No, I'm not really seeking any gratification for that matter. For an artist, what is important is to be understood, to be appreciated. It's very, very important. Artists are like children. They want to be, promoted, clapped, appreciated, all that. Like an artist, at the very core of it, you have a very small child, who wants to be appreciated.
Is there a feeling of sort of insecurity somewhere in every artist that's seeking affirmation?
An artist is always a struggling person, not necessarily for the money part, but then for creative reasons. He is a struggling soul. There is nothing like a point where you arrive and then you sit back and say, well, I have achieved this. There is nothing like a final goal, to which any real artist is progressing.
But is an artist then also an anguished soul? Does he experience the sufferings of humanity in some more intensive way?
For various reasons, he is suffering not for material, not for material gains, but then he, takes it upon himself, all the worries of others, because he has a real concern for his fellow beings. It is not very personal most of the time. It's almost verging on spirituality. Almost, not exactly the same, but this is a constant kind of struggle, search, revelations, discoveries. This goes on. This is a process.
Your films have this. You mentioned the quality of the spiritual. So they have these cadences in which there is activity, there is action, and then there is sort of almost contemplative silence where you pause to reflect on what has unfolded, or you create that space for the viewer to pause and reflect. One of the sort of significant facets of your career has been the time you have taken between films. What happens between films?
Cinema is that way a great medium. It allows meditation. It allows contemplation. And when you talk about things which you need to ponder on, you cannot be flashy. You cannot portray a character or situation like people have no mind to think about their moves. You need your private space to withdraw. Look within yourself. This is very important, I think, and cinema allows that more than any other medium.
So, in what ways does sort of the mise en scène of cinema that you started working on in the enclosed space of a darkened room where there is this time and opportunity for contemplation, what does television do to your sensibility?
Well, television has posed a very important challenge to cinema, because television can show you everything, anything that is happening anywhere in the world, instantly. That is the great potential of television. But cinema should not try to do that. So a lot of people, very often ask me, why is it that you are not shunning what is in the immediate and the contemporary? I said it will look like a newspaper article. Television is doing that every day, every evening. Everything is being talked about, discussed. Even the so-called cultural programs that come on the television, it's all about the immediate things. But then you have to cross the immediate.
To go to the sort of eternal, the universal.
Absolutely, so that you can have a comprehension of what you have passed through, what you have come out of. That's very important, or probably what is waiting for you. This is very important.
You're watching a conversation with Adoor Gopalakrishnan. We'll be right back after a short break, the winner of the Dadasaheb Phalke Award. Don't go away.
क्या हम सो रहे थे जब वो रो रहे थे? हमने अपने हाथों से अपनों को सताया, मासूमों को रुलाया। पर तोड़ने वालों से है ज्यादा जोड़ने वालों की तादाद। चल पड़ा है अमन का कारवां सरहदों को पार कर, पैगाम मोहब्बत का लिए हर हदों को पार कर। यहाँ है भाई भाई में विश्वास, और हमें है अपनी जिम्मेदारी का एहसास।
Welcome back to a continuing conversation with the great cinema director Adoor Gopalakrishnan. We sort of dodged the question of the Dadasaheb Phalke Award and what an award, any award, means to you, and what this award in particular has held out for you.
This award really surprised me, because I was not even it was most unexpected. I was not expecting it in the least. So it surprised me. The first thought that occurred to me was that maybe I may be a little too young for this big prize, nation's greatest honor, normally given to very senior film people, not necessarily filmmakers, people who are engaged in different areas of the film production. So I was not prepared for it.
So, this is, tell us about Dadasaheb Phalke. It's the Dadasaheb Phalke Award. What significance does it have for you that an award named after Dadasaheb Phalke is given to you?
No, I cannot say that it makes you feel very responsible, because I've been responsible even before. I cannot be even more responsible. Yes, I can say I feel even more responsible. Yes, but then I think I hope it will inspire younger filmmakers to really hold on to what they really believe in, have faith in themselves and carry on with that, in spite of the kind of recognition and kind of approbation and even approvals coming and not coming forth readily, Even in the face of that, they should be prepared to struggle for a cause that they really believe in. And I think that is the message I get.
Is this cause for you cinema or the message of your films, which have sort of, in a sense, moved from a more a social, ideological framework to a more personal expression? The ideological expression always, of course, filtered through the personal, but your last film on the hangman, for example, traces an individual and his dilemma located in a larger social context. So is it the passion for cinema, the image? Is it the idea behind it?
It's all together. In fact, you cannot separate it. Of course, for me, when you analyze things, when you go close to a phenomenon, what you slowly get to see is, the real personal subjective view of things. So the individual is the most important factor, and from the individual starts everything. Basically, maybe I can say that I'm talking about the individual, his family, the society, and the state, and in different combinations. I try to connect, and at the very core, it has to be the individual who causes changes, who is also affected by changes by the closer circle of family, then the society, and then ultimately the society.
You started off really with an interest in theatre, in Kathakali, in the dance forms, and then moved through a series of accidents almost, into cinema. You have gone back very often in the documentary films that you have made, and particularly in recent years you've made a lot of film on dancers and on the traditional forms of performance in Kerala. What is the connection between Kathakali dance, Moniyattam, you're about to do a film on, and cinema? What is the cross-fertilization that happens for you?
In fact, I've always been doing documentaries. In fact, at the beginning I started with the documentaries, although my original idea was not particularly to do documentaries. But then I had to, because at the institute I never thought I would become a documentary filmmaker as well. But then it was the situation that existed in the film industry was so very unwelcoming kind, that for a long period I was forced to make documentaries. It's a fact, not because particularly I loved a subject, because I started an institution when I went out, a film cooperative, and basically to keep the institution running I had to make all kinds of documentaries, commission jobs, where you don't really choose the subject, it is given to you and you have to make a film. and because of the problems of funding, etc., with the small funds we had to operate, most of the time I had to learn to operate the camera. I had to record the sound myself, edit also, because almost it was turning out to be a one-man job. And that was a great learning process for me. And parallel to my feature film work, I also started making documentaries. And for the last 20-25 years, I have been concentrating particularly on performing arts. And there is a reason, because I enjoy making these films, because in that process of making the films, I get to learn a lot about these art forms. And when you do research and when you really do the film, and you learn a lot about life. It may sound very strange, because people always connect with something very contemporary to connect to life, but then you can get to the roots of our life and culture and our living, attitudes, outlooks. All this comes very subtly through these art forms, because to have an art form like Kathakali, which is not just theater, which is just not dancing, it is not just about singing, it's not just about the spectacle and the costume and things like that, but it is everything. There is no art form like that. Same way, an art form like Mohiniyattam, an art form like Kudiyattam, probably the most sophisticated theater form in the world, about which even Indians are not really aware. We keep learning about Greek theater, and then we forget about our own tradition and culture.
What are the elements that you have sort of drawn from these forms that find expression in your film?
I'm thrilled, by the fact that the kind of sophistication these art forms have achieved, 1,000 years back, 2,000 years ago. This makes me really feel proud about this country. The levels of artistic achievements we had, for so long. And unfortunately today, we suddenly, not exactly today, for the last 200 years, we have been thinking that we are inferior to the Western culture. We have to mug everything, from there. This kind of attitude has done a lot of harm.
Do you think it's this aspect of the art form that you've been talking about, that it has so many layers of subtlety and nuance at which it communicates? It communicates both at the gross level for people who are watching and are not educated and literate in it. What do you think in cinema? Is that the distinction between the kind of cinema that you make, which is nuanced and layered and is appreciated more by people who discriminate in some ways, have the sensibility? So isn't the need for a special sensibility in some ways limiting the impact of your work?
In fact, it's very interesting, because for a Kudiyattam performance, the convention was that to have the performance done, you have at least one knowledgeable person sitting in the first row. This was the convention. I think it was a great concept, because unless why should you perform, for those who do not understand? No, but then in cinema you cannot afford it. It is also for all levels of understanding that you are addressing, when you are making a film. But then my films also have different levels, I think, because somebody watching a film of mine when he is a student in a school or a university, and then somebody watching the same film after so many years, with all the experience of having acquired the aspects of life and living, and somebody in his old age, they all will look at the same film and then perceive it very differently. I think it is very important. At each level, they should be able to contact with the work.
There is this sort of huge difference between the art forms you're talking about, which are dynamic, which are living when they're performed, and in a sense, cinema is a frozen image that is going on. It's locked in.
In fact, that is exactly what we try to transcend. For each viewer, it should not look the same. The cinema, real cinema has to transcend its own visuals and sounds. It becomes a personal experience of the viewer. depending on, because it's the viewer, who makes the cinema. In fact, he is only being helped into that experience. So he, according to his knowledge of the world, according to what he has imbibed, and then at a level of understanding, creates his own cinema. That's what happens when real good fiction, is read, by a reader. He creates his own sequences. The writer cannot explain everything. He just, gives, here and there the hints, to let the reader into that experience. The words disappear, the experience remains. This is what a cinema should also do, ideally.
You're watching a conversation with the noted filmmaker Adoor Gopalakrishnan, recent winner of the Dadasaheb Phalke Award. We'll be right back after a short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to a continuing conversation with a great Indian filmmaker whose whole world for whom is a stage, Adoor Gopalakrishnan. We were talking about the reality that cinema creates and how the audience responds to it and creates, in a sense, his own reality from the cinematic experience. To what degree and how does this happen in the context of, we were talking about regional cinema, talking about local cinema. Your cinema is universal, even though it's grounded so strongly in the realities of Kerala. And I should just say, this is a personal aside. I know it embarrasses you, but I refer to you as Guruji in private, and that really is because one of the first lessons that I learned from you was that how important and imperative it is to be grounded in the local, and from the local become universal. What are the elements that make the local universal? In a globalized environment, we're all being sort of culturally invaded all the time, and Western civilization and the images and the culture of that has become the dominant culture now in some ways. How does, in what ways does your film manage to reach out to global audiences?
No, fortunately, when I go back home, I'm not part of the English-speaking lot. I'm not, back home. I don't mean my own house only. In my society, I don't even wear the dress I'm wearing now. I don't speak in a language which is foreign to me. I live like every other Malayali, and that is not the only reason why I make why I make the films the way I do. In fact, you have to be truthful to what you are doing, the life you are portraying. To do that, you have to have lived that life yourself. You cannot be aping another culture. So you have the ambience, you have the lives of the people in which you are very much interested, and you are part of that group. And then I don't really live the life of a filmmaker too very often. It is only during the making of a film that I start, standing behind the camera and then instruct my artists and make them enact a role and this and that. But then every film of mine, I am very particular that it should, at one level, be social documents. Even when you are talking about a very personal interior life of a character, it has to necessarily belong to a time in our lives. Here, since I know the life of Kerala pretty well, pretty close, I talk about that. There are people asking me, why don't you make a film in Hindi? But then it is not the language that stops the people in the north from watching my films.
This dimension of the truth, of reality. Are you tempted sometime, because film has its own logic, its own sort of narrative structures and approaches, is the truth sometimes modified to make a more effective film?
In?
So that it's more successful, it makes greater sense to audiences that, you know, is in terms of, you know, you may decide that, well, this ending is going to be more acceptable or more successful with audiences than what reality might have been. So, I mean, you know, certainly in the world of commercial cinema, that is always done. I mean, there are alternative endings and they test it with audiences and what have you. So, what does a master filmmaker do? To what degree is he honest to the truth, as opposed to the intrusions of, you know, technology may limit you from the truth, your producer may limit you from the truth.
Yes. In fact, you know, you use your reality of the exterior, all right, but then basically what you are trying to portray is an inner reality, which is not apparent in very often. So cinema has this device that you have what you have with you is the visuals and the sounds. Using that, you get to the inner reality of things. So that you cannot fake. That you cannot fake. And then regarding the audience accepting your work, you are your first audience. And if you appreciate, if you really enjoy, you know, making that film on a particular subject with a particular treatment, if you enjoy yourself making it, then I'm sure the audiences would enjoy it.
This aspect of enjoyment, I mean, do you feel that even when you're making a film about anguish? Or what is the nature of that enjoyment? Is it sort of like catharsis, that, you know, you get an anguish or a suffering or a pain out in the open and there's joy from that? Or is it just sort of pleasurable in a different kind of way? And that was what I was alluding to in an earlier question when I said that, you know, what is the joy from film? Is it the form, seeing the juxtaposition of images, looking at layers of sound? I mean, this is great play of technology and form, which is also can be quite ecstatic. So what is the nature of the joy that you get?
It's like a mother who has a child growing in her, you know, inside her. So the mother has the pangs, mother has the anxieties, but then you know, mother is giving birth to a child, and the whole process, you know, is ecstasy, anguish, you know, everything together. You know, it's all like that. But you ultimately, you know, you enjoy it. You know, the pain of it. You really enjoy it. It's well worth it. But without pain, you know, in a happy-go-lucky way, you know, you cannot be creating things. You know, any creation for that matter, it's very interesting. Any creation for that matter is, it comes with the pain associated with it. You have to suffer. You know, there is no escape.
You know, you mentioned that the Dadasaheb Phalke Award, you know, surprised you because you were still so young. And I remember asking Mr. Mrinal Sen this question soon after he got the Dadasaheb Phalke Award.
He is even younger.
And he said, you know, this is terrible. People think that now that I've got an award, you know, this is it, I now retire.
Yeah.
And surely you're not going to retire. So what aspiration?
Manarda is even younger in my diamond.
And I know that you're very close friends, and which is why
I'm a jello of his.
I use this example. So what is it that in terms of your journey as a filmmaker, and it's an ongoing journey, what remains on the journey? Just the journey itself?
No, in fact, there is no, a journey means many things. That you pass by something, you crossed something, and you're moving forward. I don't look at it like that. I don't look at it as a journey, because as you keep living, you keep learning, and that gets reflected in your work, all the experience.
So as we continue to sort of celebrate, a dozen odd films, 30+ documentaries, your book and national award-winning book and cinema, your writing as plays, a sort of rich and intense life, we just sort of await. I mean, there are not that many accolades left for you to win, but certainly we continue to celebrate the work that continues to unfold. Anyway, thank you very much. This has been a great blessing, an honor, and a privilege. Thank you. Thank you.